The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Grandpichet and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grandpichet.
Dr. Grandpichet.
Dr. Doreen Grandpichet.
Dr. Doreen Grandpichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
They said, my little guy was diagnosed with autism at age 4. He is now 4.7. I feed him all organic and non-GMO meats and vegetables from birth. So, during my pregnancy, which was probably the issue. Not during my pregnancy, I think is what it means, which was probably the issue. Wondering if I detox on him, is autism reversible? Will the brain be able to fix itself? I appreciate a response. Thanks a million. So I hope I've got that right, because they have detours on him, but I think that means detox.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to be able to answer this question live because there's so many parents who think about autism in that way. I guess in a way, first of all, there's a little bit of self-blame, I think, in that question, which should never be. So I want to address that. And then secondly, there's a little bit of wondering if the whole thing is reversible, which I want to talk about that. That's very important. So, when you think about autism, it's really important to realize that, listen, if we knew how to prevent autism, everyone would be doing it, right? There would be a formula. We don't know how to prevent autism. We don't even know really what causes autism in everyone, because I think the problem is that autism is a certain definition right now, and it encompasses a very, very wide array of individuals. And I think there's multiple causes in there. So some people might have developed autism due to different reasons than others in the whole kind of spectrum. We do know that I think scientists have identified over, I think, 30, 40 genes that are related to some aspect of autism. But we absolutely do not have the full array of genes that have some sort of relationship. We do know that in some cases there is a genetic predisposition. What that means is that some combination of genes are present, and then when they are triggered by something in the environment, then the child's development goes in a different direction. And as it goes down a different path, the symptoms that the child exhibits, the things that happen, are then labeled as autism. So, for example, there are kids who, let's say, they're exposed to certain toxins. Yes, it could be foods, it could be, there's so many toxins in our environment that are just unpreventable. Like, it's very, very hard to not have exposure to toxins in the world nowadays, because we're not talking about just, there's all kinds of toxins on our food, right? So we don't even want to go there because there's a million of them. Our soil is pretty toxic. Overuse of antibiotics can cause some toxicity. Overuse of vaccines can cause toxicity. Water in plastic can cause toxicity. There's toxicity in the air in some areas. The use of electromagnetic fields, the Wi-Fi and internet, which has increased so significantly, can lower our threshold so that we're more susceptible to toxins. And all of that, we all experience, all of us. So one would ask, why do certain children, when exposed to those things, their development goes in a different direction? And that can be a combination of things like the child having low detoxification capabilities, what's called low redox. And that's influenced by our genes. So not something you can do much about. If you have low redox, you have low redox. And yes, you can limit your exposure to certain toxins, but when you are exposed to some things, some mild toxins, you'll have inflammation developing, and that inflammation then just makes development much harder. It's a very, very complicated cycle. So I never really want parents to think, oh my gosh, this would have never happened if I had eaten organic foods when I was pregnant. It really isn't that simple. I wish it was. If it was, believe me, every pregnant mom would only be eating organic foods, right? And that's just not the case. So let's put that aside and let's talk about detoxification. And you have to be very careful about this because there are dangerous things we can do to detoxify as well. In fact, like some of the ways that you can detoxify from metals, toxic metals, which some kids actually are exposed to very high levels of metals and they do need detoxification, but it's a pretty dangerous process and you have to be very, very cautious when this type of thing is done. And then the question becomes, what is the cause of the toxicity? What age did it affect the child? How high is the toxicity? And as we detoxify, what reversible things can we expect to see? So all of those are related to each other. And let's assume that you have a child who has, is reacting to some toxins in their food, and you then are able to modify that by modifying the child's diet. So in some ways, you're reversing the exposure to the toxicity. Meanwhile, that is taking years to do. And now the child is, let's say, 5 years old. And during the course of the previous 5 years, they've just not gained information from their environment the way that another child would, for example. So they have fallen behind. And so it's not a matter of the moment that you change their diet or you change their whatever, exposure or the things they're allergic to or their environment, whatever. It's not that that moment just reverses everything, because meanwhile you've had some time where the child has just not been learning. So really now, or they've been learning in a different way. Let me put it that way. They've been learning in a different way. So now you kind of have to go back and help the child catch up and help the child learn a lot of things. And sometimes it's possible to kind of give the child a massive number of things to learn, and they are able to organize it in the way that they need so that they can use it. And sometimes it's just too much, right? And the child is 5 years old and they're supposed to be learning the things a 5-year-old learns, but they're also learning things a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old learn. And so it's overload and it's a lot of stuff. And the child has a hard time organizing it all in a way that's retrievable. Meanwhile, also remember that it's not just about falling behind learning skills. It's also about developing coping behaviors, I want to call them. Like, for example, when a child is 3, 4, or 5, and let's say they haven't developed language, and let's say that's because whatever is getting in the way, whether it's the toxicity has affected their brain development or their sensory involvement, whatever it is, but it has led to this child not being able to use language the way that a typically developing child would, right? So as a result of that, it's not just that we have to go back and teach the language. It's also that the child has figured out other ways to communicate. What are those other ways? Sometimes those other ways are challenging behaviors. And all the child's really doing is coping and trying to figure out how to communicate. So now you have a child who needs to learn a lot of skills that they didn't learn, but you also have a child who has learned challenging ways of communicating, which you need to eliminate. So there's a lot that goes into this kind of what we talk about reversing of the symptoms of autism. And so, yes, you certainly can start to do the things that you think are right. It's not always about organic foods. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's as simple as like food coloring. Sometimes it's gluten, casein, corn, soy. I mean, there's so many things that our kids don't really digest or break down. And sometimes it's about metals. Sometimes it's about just exposure to plastics. There's lots of different things. Whatever you can do to help the child live in a clean environment is going to help. Certainly, it's going to help reduce inflammation. That's true of everyone, by the way. That's also true of us. Like whatever we can do to live in a more clean environment is always going to help.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.